copies, but Sheriff McCarthy said that you all prefer your tablet. So I can refer to them, but I don't have the ability to advance the slides. So I guess I can just say when I'm going to.
That's fine. We'll follow along. We've gotten pretty good at that in here. But thank you. So yeah, sorry, I need to do so welcome back to the House Committee on Government Operations and Military Affairs. We're doing half of our morning here and taking up the report back on the report about courthouse security that we had ordered in Act 17, Act 30 for Mr. So welcome. If you want to introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you so much, Chair McCarthy. Terry Corsone, State Court Administrator, and I'm joined by our Director of Security at the Judiciary, Robert Shaw.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We thought what we would do, we had submitted the report back when it was due December 1, 2023. I did attach a copy of it as well, but we're basically going to summarize the report for you, and then we're here to answer any questions. I was going to provide some background to the report, and then Rob was going to talk about the specifics of the 3 recommendations that were made at your directive in terms of the report. And then Greg Mosley, who's our Chief of Finance and Administration, is here to answer any questions about the budget numbers. One of the requests was a budget request in conjunction with the directive. And then Judge Zoni is going to give just a judge's perspective on courthouse security in general. So what we were going to do and want to leave time certainly for the persons with whom we consulted in preparing the report, including the Sheriff's Association, the SCA, and I think is Andy participating for the State's Attorney's and Sheriff's Office. They were the primary stakeholders, but we thought we'd kind of just explain it as best we could and then see what questions you might have.
That sounds great.
Great.
I think everybody should have your slide deck up by now.
So S17 included a variety of components, but there was one specifically directed to the judiciary. And it directed us to submit this report by December 1 that addressed 3 specific topics. One was the number of sheriff deputies needed for reasonable court security operations. 2, any recommendation regarding the creation of a classified position that would be needed to achieve that recommendation for security levels. And 3, whatever the corresponding budget request would be for those recommendations. So again, by way of just brief background, and I don't know if you've had a chance to review the report, I also sent a memo that just kind of summarizes the report that Andrea has, and then we have these slides that even further summarize it. So it's hopefully there in enough different formats to follow. In essence, the Vermont Supreme Court is responsible for courthouse security, both per the Vermont Constitution and a variety of different statutes. Historically, sheriff deputies have provided the primary means of security for courthouses for centuries. And then more recently, in recent decades, because of basically workforce reduction in sheriff forces, we've had to supplement courthouse security with private security and with also state court officers. So right now there's a combination of those 3 different types of personnel. In 2014, the legislature directed the judiciary to do a courthouse security assessment. And I wasn't with the judiciary then, but I get the sense from the legislation that they were looking to actually reduce costs for courthouse security. So in conjunction with that directive, we had the National Center of State Courts do an overview of courthouse security, assessment. And the assessment basically had the opposite conclusion. It said that there are serious challenges here, and you need to increase security versus decrease it. I think there was an effort to potentially reduce security costs and a suggestion that, well, maybe you don't need security if there isn't a hearing happening in the courthouse that day. That was, I think, the premise for this assessment. But the assessment did lead to very pointed recommendations in terms of adequate courthouse security. And we did make, I say we, I wasn't with the judiciary then, but requests were made to increase courthouse security. Those requests were not approved. The legislature did significantly increase the amount of salary paid to sheriffs in the last couple of years. And we were able to incorporate a number of the security measures that were recommended in the assessment as well, including the digitization of courthouse monitors, screening devices at every entrance, every public entrance to courthouses, whether it's the metal detectors or the x-ray machines, the wands, duress buttons, incident reporting system. A variety of measures have taken place to bring, and Robin worked very hard and very creatively with law enforcement, including, for example, the federal courts, which are very well resourced. If they are upgrading their x-ray machines, we've been successful in being able to get kind of cast-offs, but it's much better than what we had. So there's been very steady improvement in the security measures that have been implemented at the courthouse. I'm very happy to say. So in conjunction with the S-17 directive that said that we're to report to you on the numbers of courthouse security staffing and any new classified positions, Rob and I visited each of the 23 state courthouses over the past summer. It was a very, very useful exercise to be able to speak with court staff, speak with judges, speak with local stakeholders in terms of the security situation at each courthouse. And as you can imagine, it varies quite a bit. We have courthouses where in terms of busyness, courthouses that have 400 cases a year, up to courthouses that have 9,000 cases a year. So there's a lot of difference and variation, and we recognize that security circumstances vary. So it was really useful to go to each courthouse, assess their situation, get their recommendations. And it was also very helpful to consult with the Sheriff's Association, with the Vermont State Employees Association, with the Department of Sheriffs and State's Attorneys as well to get their perspectives. And we want to thank them very much we had a series of meetings with them, series of drafts, different options discussed, and they were extremely collaborative and cooperative, and it was really a pleasure working with them. Once we had then a draft about which we had general consensus, we then did also meet with other frequent court user stakeholders, BGS, Department of Corrections, Department of Mental Health, Department of Children and Families, Vermont Bar Association, Vermont Legal Aid, Office of Child Support, those groups that oftentimes have representatives in the courts. So they've all reviewed what was ultimately submitted to you on December 1, and we really, thank you for the impetus to go through that exercise. In the course of gathering all of that input, I wanted to just kind of highlight the basic factors that inform the recommendations. One has to do with security personnel roles, which you wouldn't necessarily have any familiarity with if you're not, at the courthouse day in and day out. But there are three major levels, if you will, of security roles. One is the screener, and that's the person who's at the main entrance. They play a very critical role, and that is to prevent weaponry from entering the courthouse or anything that could be used, to cause harm. So that's kind of like the first line of defense, and that would be the screener. And then in the courtrooms themselves, as hearings are taking place, a court officer presence to ensure that there's decorum, to ensure that if anybody's getting out of turn, that they can control it, de-escalate, respond to it appropriately. And then the other role is what is called a rover. And that would be security personnel who's around the building, inside the building and outside the building, able to respond as needed within the building. Also, we may have, for example, people who turn themselves in at the courthouse to be able to take people into custody if need be, or a judge's direction. So those are the three main types of security roles. Then there are different levels of security risk. And just kind of in a nutshell, it's primarily first of all, persons in custody that you would have typically the most risk. They have an incentive to want to escape, for example. Transport deputies do accompany anybody that's in custody for whatever type hearing, criminal, family, probate, civil, whatever the person is there for. The other, but primarily incidents, if you look at the incident reports, it's more in criminal hearings and family hearings that you have the highest incidence. And that includes also juvenile. Juvenile is part of the family docket. Civil, it can depend. You might have, for example, a landlord-tenant case, or certainly in a stalking case where there would be a risk, a higher potential threats. Probate, Judicial Bureau, Environmental Division, much less so. But recognizing that the circumstances could vary such that security personnel might be needed in any division, in any type hearing, in any type day. And that's one thing that Rob and his team, are tuned into every day, checking in to see is there any need to be attentive to the need for greater security in this courthouse for whatever reason on that particular day. The other level can vary in terms of type of hearing. Now that we're in the remote hearing world, you have in-person hearings, you have remote hearings, and you have hybrid, where some people are in person, some persons are remote. Certainly, in-person hearings would pose the highest potential threat. If it's a remote hearing, much less, if any. So that's also a factor in terms of determining what is needed. Ultimately, it's up to the judge in each individual courtroom to determine what level of security is needed. So, for example, if it's somebody in the civil docket, where normally you wouldn't have a court officer in each and every hearing, if they anticipate because of the litigants involved or the nature of the case or the hearing, they may say we need additional security, and that's where Rob steps in to figure out, where can I hold people. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, the factors. And just in general, we have a court officer, a security officer in every criminal and family hearing, in person or hybrid. If it's civil, probate, judicial bureau, environmental division, it's in any hearing as needed and typically judge directed. Court staff may also, tip off saying, okay, we anticipate some issues here just from whatever interactions they've had with the litigants up to that case. So that's kind of the background for what factors went into a determination of what level of staffing is needed, what level of security force. So based on all the input from meeting with the judges, the court staff, and the stakeholders, Rob can now kind of give you an overview about the three recommendations. The first having to do with the recommendation regarding the number of security positions and roles, and then the second one regarding a classified position.
Thank you, Terry. Just for some additional background, prior to COVID, just about 500,000 visitors came to our Vermont courts. After COVID, where we initiated the new hybrid of remoting, we now see at an increasing rate attendance of visitors to our courts. It's a much lesser percentage currently. However, what we've also noted is that there are incident report numbers that suggest threatening behavior or incidents where security had a circumstance that was identified as an issue have continued to climb. So for the period of 2023, we received 910 reported incidents from security personnel related to courthouse operations. Now, those can range from issues with structural mechanics of the building that could impact security, to screening issues, to actual confrontations, disorderly conduct, violence within the courtroom from litigants as part of court procedures. So the risks are still much very present for us. If we look back even to 2018, we had 311 reported incidents. So our reporting mechanisms have certainly been fine-tuned to being more comprehensive in 2024. But what I am seeing in terms of our risk numbers is that those are steadily increasing. So commensurate with that, and with our statewide tour and with all of the valued input, we arrived at some conclusions where we needed to reorganize our protective capacities within the courts. So at this point, we're looking at 47 armed uniformed sheriff deputies. Now, when we talk about sheriff deputies, these are certified law enforcement officers capable of investigations and arrest powers. These are essential elements to have within our courts. As Terry had spoken to, we have individuals who present on warrants or taken into custody, and we have disorderly conduct or violence where we need law enforcement intervention, and having those officers on site is important. Balancing that, and in those roles, the rover, as Terry had talked about earlier, is an essential element because there's so much variation in court security needs within our buildings, from individuals who are taken into custody, who are placed in a detention area, to reissuing citations, cite and release circumstances for individuals who presented the court on, say, a warrant and then they're released. We need a law enforcement capability, and the rover position allows us and provides us that latitude to provide those services. Additionally, we do have some circumstances in the state where we do have deputy sheriffs working within the courtrooms, which has historically worked well, and those are mechanisms we would seek to, in some degrees, continue But there's a balance to that where we're really interested in shifting the law enforcement presence to the front of the access points to the courthouses, where the largest risks would present if someone were wanting to be frank, attack a courthouse. So the recommendation is that we would increase some of our armed uniformed deputy sheriffs from numbers, and Greg can speak to this in a few minutes. And then we would also balance that with 33 judiciary, what we call plainclothes court security operators. And these are state employees who receive special training for court operations and the court functions within the courthouse. We look at court operations as the front of the house and the back of the house. There's screening operations and protection and roving. And then there's the courtroom operations, which is a complex process of ensuring that the litigants, the lawyers, the judge, the jury, the visitors, and court staff all are coordinated in a manner within the hearing, and that security is maintained at all times within these hearings. So with that adjustment, we additionally have another model where we, due to COVID, had to implement a series of what we refer to as regional court security officers who travel around the state based on security needs that can arise on a schedule a week before or within hours of an occurrence. So with COVID, we still have the routine individuals who are out sick, who are unavailable. And then we have additional court hearings, jury draws, and jury trials, which are resource needy. And so this resource of having 5 personnel who are able to travel around the state, and they're in force today and are often in different courts on a daily basis, has become an absolutely highly successful venture on the part of the judiciary, and is something that is definitely recommended within S17. And as part of that, we have 2 existing court security managers who have some regional responsibilities, primarily Costello and the Supreme Court. And they also oversee training and operational training of new sheriff's deputies, new private security currently, and all of our new state of Vermont employees as we're able to hire them. My mission at the judiciary is to create a defined court standard for all levels of security that we have in the building. And whether that's a contracted sheriff's deputy all the way through a state employee, we want to have the abilities to have the same expectations of their skills and abilities. So we do have training managers who are out there now providing remote as well as in-person training on a consistent basis to support the court security effort. So
that was the first recommendation in terms of number of personnel. And then the second one is the new classified position.
Right. So similar to law enforcement and in all of security, we continue to have a significant challenge in hiring. And that goes on today. In the past week, we've had, for example, 3 individuals who had applied for state classified security positions, pursue other jobs because we need to have a more solid level position to provide them. So part of this recommendation would be to hire at a new pay grade level specific court security, these specific court security positions, and have a training expectation that they complete a larger degree of security training that we ought prior to or in less than what we offer today to our current state of Vermont personnel. Additionally to that, we're seeking to enhance their capabilities for what's called non-lethal use capabilities, to have statutory protections so that in the function of their job, which they do today, with the same risk and danger levels, they have the capacities to provide protection to the visitors, to themselves, to the courtroom, and court personnel within the building. So this is a new expansion. It would be in the non-lethal use of force, we're not trying to create a law enforcement entity. We would utilize law enforcement level training to support this new position, which I think, again, given our risk levels, is something that makes complete sense.
And these state court officers would strictly have a security role in hearings, in courtrooms, in hearings. It would also include a component which right now is lacking, whereby if there's not a hearing, if the hearing gets continued, if the hearing ends early, they are also authorized to fulfill administrative functions so that there's no dead time. They're trained to do the security, that's their primary function, but if they're assigned to a hearing, to a courthouse, and there are no hearings for whatever reason, because it happens, hearings end early or they might be continued, whatever, but they have the ability to perform administrative tasks. And we would, I'm thinking expungement, something that you can pick up, put down quickly, but be productive during that time. So that's built into this new classified position to offer that level of productivity and flexibility. So that's the second point. The third has to do with the budget request related to those recommendations. When you have then the figures, it's basically would result in 18 new positions. And I don't know if Greg wanted to get into specifics or if you wanted us to kind of delve into the total budget request or.
I think we can see from the slide deck, because I was certainly skipping ahead as you were talking. That's always the danger of giving us the slides. I recognize that. But I think it might be good to orient the committee to just, what we're looking at here and what that
An
is
overview?
for across the hall.
Okay, did you want Greg to come up for that then? And maybe Greg and then Judge Zone, because Judge Zone was then going to talk about the judge perspective for security, Greg.
Yeah, I think that sounds great. So Greg, you want to come up first and just walk us through the requests? Oh, yeah, please.
She likes having support.
I appreciate that, endorse that fully.
For the record, my name is Greg Mosley, I'm the Chief of Finance and Administration for the Judiciary.
Tom Zone, Chief Superior Judge.
And in terms of the position numbers of the budget, I'm kind of open to whatever questions you may have. This does increase the footprint of our statewide security force for all of our courthouses. We have 23 courthouses. Most counties have 2, some have 1. Washington County has 3. And we currently have 69 FTEs, and Terry mentioned that some of those are deputies, some of those are employees, and some of those are private security, but 69 total FTEs. This recommendation would be to increase that by a net of 18 positions to 88 FTEs for 23 courthouses. We are recommending that we not use private security guards. That is supplemental and used only when necessary, when we can't get employees or deputies where we need them. So this recommendation proposes no private security. And we currently spend in our budget $6.8 million on either positions or contracts for security. These recommendations would increase that by about $2 million. So it would be 8.8 million total. And I'll just take questions, I think, on the numbers if there are.
Then we're looking at the representative.
Sure, thanks for coming in. And Mark, this is part of you too. In Windham County, we went through a transition several years ago where there wasn't the kind of money needed to continue to pay the sheriffs who were providing the security. And so a private firm was brought in. I think there's now sheriff's deputies in the courthouse now. But what I hear you saying is that wouldn't be the case. Privates would not be in there, and I forget the name of the company.
Security.
And this would then be state money paying for this, or rather than was the money previously coming from the county?
No, those, okay. The funding for courthouse security all comes from the state, all general fund.
So I'm just trying to make sure we don't run into another situation where we bring in the sheriff and at some point, I guess, whatever the budget constraints were, they forced that to change and
Yeah, that was, happened around 2016, and we contracted for a firm to come in. It started just in Wyndham, but they are now operating in 4 or 5 counties at about 6 different courthouses because of other gaps that have been risen. And right now, in Wyndham, they're operating pretty well. There's an economy of scale. There's, I think, 5 positions, security guards. There's a supervisor, and it's working well. But there's other places in the state where they might just one person at a courthouse, and that's not the situation. We'd rather have law enforcement.
and if I could follow up, just to say that I think coming from a perspective of someone who worked in family services and is still a guardian ad litem in court, what I understand is, let's say a child has to be brought into custody at a hearing. Private security people are not able to do that. They have to call if there's not a certified law officer there at the time. Is that accurate?
Yeah, the guards do not hold people in custody. They can restrain in a situation, but we really need law enforcement to do
Right.
that.
Yeah, so that is
That's a limitation.
detriment to having them there, whereas
Yeah.
law enforcement can take care of those situations right then and there.
That's exactly right. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. I skipped over Representative Cooper. My apologies,
No.
Representative Higley. I make sure I'm doing air traffic control here. Go ahead, Representative Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know who will answer this. The people that are on private security and the anticipated state employees have what training at this point? Are they certified in any way? Do they carry anything? Are they anything other than the person that sits up in the left-hand side of the court and watches things go on? Do they have any ability to quell anything that's happening inside the courtroom? And the second part of the question is, several years ago, somebody was murdered in the courthouse parking lot in Barry. What substantive changes have been made that would have prevented that?
Well, the first part of your question, our employees, the state employees do not carry weapons. They're not certified to carry weapons. In their private job, they might have been a police officer or something and have been trained, but that's not something that we provide. They don't carry weapons. They are trained in de-escalation and court procedures. They are trained to run the security equipment at the front, the screening equipment. And that's it. They're not armed. The private security guards are armed. They do carry a weapon. They are certified with the Secretary of State. They've gone through significant training in restraints and handcuffs and guns. And they are armed. We have 10 of them throughout the state. And then, of course, there's the county deputies, and they've gone through police academy training.
So when I say armed, I'm not restricting myself to a firearm.
Yeah, our employees do not carry tasers, batons, anything like that.
And the second part?
What was the second part again?
Well, the more important part, a couple of years ago, somebody was murdered in a
Oh,
courthouse
yeah,
parking
very
lot. What have we done to change that?
I thought that was a state office building. I don't believe that
It
was
was.
place in the
It was.
courthouse parking lot right out back.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So in terms of the courthouse, we do have eyes outside the courthouse now. We have the newer security cameras cover parking lots, sidewalks, all of the entranceways. And our rovers, where we have them, are able to rove around the building and cover the grounds. And that's the extent, I think, of our exterior monitoring, unless Rob has something to add to that.
No, that's a digital camera system.
Yeah.
They have a central, there's, they look, see them from different
Yes.
positions.
Yes. Thank you.
Explain that.
So we do have digital camera systems that now have exterior and internal public surveillance areas. And there are access points within the buildings where those are monitored, and there's more than one per building.
So at this point, you're differentiating between a courthouse that's in a state building as opposed to a standalone courthouse in terms of your,
This is the security level for all the courthouses, and some of the courthouses have executive branch agencies within them.
Yeah.
The particular incident you mentioned happened in a state office that was not a courthouse. So there, I don't have any information about the security that they've taken or the changes that they've made.
Representative Higley.
Thank you. This may be a question for the Director of Security, but I think you had mentioned 311 incidents since 2018, is that correct?
In 2018, we recorded 311. And that has progressively increased essentially through 2024. For this year, we have 263 to present that have been filed.
How many did you have in 2023?
2023, we had 910. Prior to that, during COVID, 2022, there were 301. 2021 was 103. And then 2020, 263, which is again a COVID adjustment for remoting. 2019, we had 715 logged security incident reports.
Can you give me a range of those incidents? I mean, from severe to not so severe?
Yes, we have, we collect a variety of data points with security incident reports. Anything from inappropriate communications, disorderly conduct, any infractions from an individual or persons towards a court that would represent a threat are recorded. Other security incidents could be if we had a screening system failure, that represents a potential breach. If we had an escape, if we also now have expanded our monitoring to the whole array of social media. So while we do get incident reports regarding disorderly behaviors, those could actually occur outside of the courthouse entirely. So we receive threats nationally, internationally, locally from a array of individuals.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I think if there aren't any burning questions from the committee, that we'll hear from other folks. Judge Zoni, did you want to offer more testimony on this before we let you out of the chair?
Sure. Just wanted to touch base on when we look at security, oftentimes you don't need it until you do, right? It's like many other things. We have reports, we don't have people who have assaulted judges in the courtroom, like we saw where? In Nevada. 7 million people have watched that video so far, and I suspect many around the table have seen it, whether it's on the evening news or on social media. And what happened in that case was the individual was being sentenced, and he decided that he was going to go after the judge. He comes over the bench, he somehow was able to get around the table, jumps over and starts beating on the judge and has to be pulled off. His rationale for that, stated after the event, was he was having a bad day and wanted to kill the judge. We have in our courts every day individuals who are coming to court, and it's not usually by choice. People don't wake up and go, boy, I can't wait to go to court today. It's going to be a golden day. People are there because we're dealing with extremely critical and important issues involving child custody. We're involving criminal justice. We have victims coming in, and we have an obligation to assure the security of every one of those individuals coming into our building, as well as the staff and the judges who work in those buildings. That begins at the front door. If someone's coming into that building and they might have a gun on them or they have other weapons on them, at that moment, it's critical to be able to ascertain whether they have a weapon and are coming in. If they are caught at that door, there are times where people who were coming in to do something bad, at that moment, even someone who may be experiencing mental issues may recognize the difference between, well, I got one choice. I can either fight my way through to go where I wanted or fight my way out and go the other way. So just because we find the weapons doesn't always mean that everything is going to go smoothly. Then when we're in the room, judges make decisions that might take someone's children away from them. We issue orders that require people to leave their house. We put people in jail. And those are stressful, emotional moments, and people will get escalated. There can be outbursts. About a decade ago, I was in court. I imposed bail on a gentleman who apparently wasn't happy with my decision. While wearing handcuffs, he flipped over the table. Thankfully, there were two sheriffs standing next to him, and they were able to stop him. But that wasn't so much in my mind, oh, they're going to come harm me. I was worried about the state's attorney standing 5 feet away, the victim in the courtroom standing back, and other individuals. And so when we talk about security, I think it's important to keep in mind that every day we deal with issues, and it's not just about the judges, it's about the staff, and it's about everyone who comes in, because we have an obligation to them. We don't want to have what occurred in Nevada or in Mississippi several years ago when a judge was attacked in the courtroom. The problem we run into, obviously, is that when someone leaves, as Representative Hooper points out, something horrible and tragic can happen outside of the court. But we do what we can. As Rob mentioned, there are cameras. If we have someone in the courthouse who there's an escalated circumstance, security will walk them out to their car. And the sheriffs we have will assist them in trying to maintain their safety there. And one of the reasons why we don't have the types of incidents that you see in other areas is because we are vigilant. And we also have judges who are trained in de-escalation to try to have a calm and compassionate approach to bring people down when they might be escalated. But if that doesn't work, the security approach that we take is critical. And the S-17 report outlined a strategy and policies that would assure the safety going forward as best we can for everyone who enters our buildings and works in them. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for being here. And before, I just wanted the committee to know to level set expectations here. You know, we're at the beginning of obviously presentations across the hall on FY25 budget. This is obviously something we ask for feedback on from the stakeholders. The judiciary has given their testimony. We're going to have some of the other partners and stakeholders comment on this proposal next, and we'll be asked, of course, to kind of weigh in on the budget recommendation to our colleagues across the hall. We're not going to have that discussion today, but so I just wanted to make sure we kind of got the general concepts. We're reminded about why we asked for this, and I think you've gotten a good sense from Judge Zone and his colleagues of what the ask is, and a reminder of why now. And so I'm hoping that we're able to, come to a conclusion and give a good recommendation over the next, couple of weeks. And if we want to have some of these folks back to participate in committee discussion about the future of courthouse security and who should be doing it and where, happy to, schedule more time for this in the future if we feel like that's needed before we make a recommendation. So thank you, Judge Sonny. Thank you very much. So next up, Sheriff Anderson, I think, happy to take the witness chair. Welcome back.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, Committee, good morning. For the record, Mark Anderson. I'm Sheriff of Windham County. I'm here in my capacity as the President of Vermont Sheriff's Association. I know that this committee has heard it, but I'm going to say it. Everything with sheriffs is complex. We'll start there. I'm actually going to read a quote from a book called Team of Teams, written by retired Army General, about the words complexity and complex as it relates to this topic. Edward Lorenz, who's a meteorologist and something else, I forget what, studied at MIT, he said, the butterfly effect is a physical manifestation of the phenomenon of complexity, not complexity in the sense that we use the term in daily life, a catch-all for things that are not simple or intuitive, but complexity in a more restrictive, technical, and baffling sense. This kind of complexity is difficult to define, and those who study it often fall back on Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart's comment on obscenity. I know it when I see it. Things are complex, such as living ecosystems, national economies, They have a diverse array of connected elements that interact frequently. Because of this density of linkages, complex systems fluctuate extremely and exhibit unpredictability. In the case of weather, a small disturbance in one place could trigger a series of responses that build into unexpected and severe outcomes in another place because of the billions of tiny interactions between the origin and the outcome. Simply put, complicated. We can build like an organizational chart. We can see the connections and complexity. It's a ball of yarn. And so when I talk about the reasons why 2016, we had, in fact, my department withdraw from providing court security. And later on, we talk about the different complexities that are the macro issues of sheriff's departments. You know about retirement. I'm not going to talk about today other than to say that is one piece of yarn in this ball. You know about labor shortages across all of Vermont. One more piece of a macroeconomic issue that is affecting everyone. And so when I'm competing to employ deputy sheriffs, I'm competing with what Brattleboro PD is paying, what the Vermont State Police are paying, what Montpelier PD is paying, even though they are 100 miles away from where I am. So all of these things start to interact with each other as we talk about, well, why? I'm going to save everything else about complexity, and I'm happy to go into details, just to say Vermont Sheriff's Association supports the judiciary's proposal. We want to provide security to courthouses. We're not obligated to. In fact, nowhere in the Constitution does it give us the responsibility to do that. It does give the judiciary the responsibility to do that. We are there because we agree to be there because we want to. We see it as part of the mission that we serve. The economic issues that troubled my department, the judiciary, I believe we've done work over the last several years to improve that, and my department returned to providing security in Brattleboro about 3 years ago, 2, because we were able to recognize that paying $26 to the sheriff's department to pay a reasonable wage, retirement, healthcare, taxes, equipment, training, and on, that wasn't reasonable. And so we worked with the legislature and the judiciary to improve those circumstances. In other words, an investment was made into court security that helped improve the situations. Have we solved all of them? I don't think so. But this is part of the work that we get to do to recognize problems and solve those things. During S17 last year, we talked about a proposal that would have state deputies. Through the work that we did after leaving this committee last year with the judiciary, with VSEA, with a variety of stakeholders, it started to become clear that we were talking about another complexity that involved a variety of different factors that then brought us back to the judiciary's proposal that has been presented to you. We worked with the judiciary to identify efficiencies. And so if we talk in a bottom line sense, we have a revenue column, that's the taxes coming in to pay for the service. We have an expense column, that's deputies being employed to provide the service. But then we have a third column, which is resource allocation. And so are there times where deputy sheriffs were used to do administrative tasks that don't require them? Yeah, we wanted to be efficient with the resource that was applied. Is that the best use of a deputy's time? No. And so as we talked with the judiciary and said, it's really hard for me to hire a 0.25 full-time equivalent employee. People who come into law enforcement want a job. It's a career. They're looking for 40 hours a week. When we talked with the judiciary about holidays, well, contract employees don't normally get holidays. That's part of the contract. They said, well, that's fine, but I'm still employing 1.0 FTEs who would anticipate sick time, vacation time, holidays, like any state employee. And so as we started to navigate through a variety of federal and state labor law or labor expectations, we started to come back to a system that was collaborative with the judiciary, collaborative with our employees and our departments to deliver a service that's reasonable for Vermonters as well as our court system. I'm kind of the why guy here. I'm happy to talk about proposals of what, but I think it's really the judiciary's position, or I should say responsibility, to identify the security needs. And so we're here to support their needs. We're here to push forward, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
So thank you for the testimony, and it looks like there's 7.07 new sheriffs that are being acquired here. Well, realistically, and you've mentioned it in the past, it's hard to come up with new employees. So what is realistically, what do you think about that?
So a few things. You heard the judiciary speak about the different positions. And so part of the resource allocation is identifying where do we need sworn law enforcement. The rover position makes a lot of sense because they are responsive to issues as they come up in the courthouse. The front door security, I can train general law enforcement to handle that aspect, and we work with the judiciary to add additional training to front door security. A court officer requires some nuanced training. And we've also historically worked with the judiciary to obtain that training, but it's more of a niche skill set to teach. And so working to identify what made sense through this proposal that the judiciary has put forward, we have aligned law enforcement into the full-time equivalent positions that we can take general law enforcement training and with a far lower footprint apply the judiciary's specifics to that person. It's easier for us to recruit and retain the individual. I mentioned the retirement bill. We are hopeful that the retirement bill that's before this committee will proceed. We think that that will also be beneficial in helping us retain people. As the Treasurer's Office mentioned, the pension system is designed to be a retention tool. So we are hopeful. That's an issue that affects roughly half the departments in the state. So some departments are okay, and some departments are saying, we're really hoping for this. We have had good communications with the judiciary and being able to explain what our pressures are to say, this year we are at this amount of money and this is what it costs to stay in business. I just learned Brattleboro PD raised their rates for their initial hiring, and next year I might have a different conversation that needs to be had. And so this is part of that ball of yarn that keeps getting tugged on. It is seen across the state. One agency starts offering a sign-on bonus. I'm competing to keep my employee. So there's some macro level issues that affect law enforcement, but they also affect other businesses. What we know is that when we offer good wages, when we offer sustainable benefits, when we treat people well in the context of employment, but also in the or in the context of good training and support from within their organization, we see retention. So I'm hopeful law enforcement, as it starts to build momentum in hiring, we see that industry improve.
Thanks.
Representative Hooper, and then I want to make sure we have time for our other witnesses.
I'm gonna try to speak quickly. And we talked about the actual, you go to New York City, you go in the subway, you got transit police, you go to boom, boom, boom. We talked about actually establishing some kind of actual force that would be trained at a level that they could accomplish, except for the court officer probably tasked, but still be certified, have authority, and not necessarily be full-fledged employee of you or an employee of the court.
Have we talked about it? I don't recall, but I'm happy to talk about it now. The part of the discussions that we had were to create state deputies that would incorporate, and we were saying it would identify better access to benefits, pay, and process that would help us recruit and retain. Part of the issue that we ran into was a constitutional issue, in that the judiciary is responsible for the court security, and we fall with our state transport deputies, which we were trying to mold that to be a state court officers or state court deputies. We're trying to basically say, well, let's repeat that system, which came into a constitutional conflict with the executive branch telling the judiciary what to do. And so that was one piece. Then we said, what if we consider putting the state deputies under the judiciary? And so sheriffs would operate in an executive branch and in a judicial branch in terms of supervising the employees, but the two separate branches of government will be responsible for the employees. And as we were looking at it, we're saying the cost to set up the infrastructure to do that doesn't quite make sense, because now we're duplicating where we already have the services on one side that we're now carrying over. And so the logical concept to create a service that would provide this, such as a judicial marshal, I mean, it's possible, but then it comes with the cost that comes with it, where the pragmatic self said, okay, but it probably is just easier and more approachable to come back with this proposal.
Thank you very much, Sheriff Anderson. I'm sure we'll have more conversation about this topic. So thanks for being with us.
Thank you for your time.
Steve, are you coming up or are you Anton?
Speak on.
Okay, great.
Make phone a friend if I need help.
Sounds great. Just didn't want to leave anybody out.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. For the record, I'm Steve Howard. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont State Employees Association. I want to thank the committee. First of all, I just want to say, having a previous career that brought me every day to work in the Costello Courthouse, I understand personally how important this issue is. And it's something that is on the top of each of our members' minds, particularly in the world that we live in that is becoming more unraveled as they try to do the work that they're assigned to do. I want to thank the committee for your attention to this critical issue. Security of state employees and judicial employees is probably the most significant responsibility that an employer has. And I just want to say, I think I want to be clear that VSEA, the members of the VSEA believe that the level of security in the courthouses and in state office buildings in general, Representative Hooper made reference to the tragedy in Barrie, is seriously lacking. That it's inadequate, it's haphazard, that it's disorganized, and it's not prioritized by the management. And so I'm grateful that the committee is willing to take this issue up, even as it just pertains to the courthouses, but it's certainly an issue that could be expanded beyond that to all of the state office buildings throughout the state. In fact, we are supporting a bill, H-147, that's currently in the House Institutions Committee, that we think does adequately address safety and security in both the courthouses and in the state office buildings, that essentially, what Representative Hooper suggested, and expands the Capitol Police to all state employees. So our members would have the same level of security that legislators have when they're doing the important functions of carrying out the laws that lawmakers support pass. I would say that we're very happy to see that we're moving away from private security. I think very clearly from our members' perspective, the experiment with Securitas was a failure. They did not have any confidence in the safety and security provided by Securitas, and they're grateful and happy to see that there's a movement in another direction away from Securitas. We certainly support the additional allocation of deputy sheriffs and of the judicial officer 2 positions that are recommended in the report. We support additional security personnel in the courthouses, along with the 3 supervisors for the judicial officers. I think where we diverge a bit from the rest of the stakeholders is in our view that the report doesn't actually deliver on what this committee and what the legislature requested, which was a recommendation regarding any needed creation of classified positions responsible for courthouse security services. And here's the key, similar to classified positions of transport deputies. Not a lot of leeway in that direction. You don't see that recommendation in this report. And VSCA strongly supports, while we do support the additional staff, we strongly support assigning the deputy sheriffs to the Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs. And we support providing that department with additional staffing resources in order to carry out this responsibility. The judiciary can choose to meet its responsibility constitutionally any way it wishes to. In the courthouses across the state, the judiciary also has responsibility for maintaining those courthouses. And who does that? BGS staff that works for the executive, because that's how they have chosen to meet their responsibility. And so they can do that with security as well. I want to just comment a little bit on why our members feel so strongly that that these positions be state positions and that they be allocated to the department and not just to the judiciary. First of all, our members, I think, have been very clear with us that they don't have a lot of confidence in the judiciary in their ability to take the security situation, the security environment where we're operating in seriously. Just a few examples of late that reinforce that position. So one recent situation in the Costello where a person was screened into the building and allowed to stay allowed into the building and then stayed overnight in the courthouse. Was discovered by a BGS janitor at 4 a.m. in the courthouse, scared her half to death. She was there by herself. That's an example of a very serious breach of security, only made worse when the management of the courthouse made light of it and joked about it with an email to all of the staff, not exactly building confidence among our members that that administrator took their safety and security seriously. Recently, you may have read about the state's attorneys in Chittenden County being evacuated from the courthouse as a result of a serious threat. Our members reported that it took an hour and a half before anybody else in the courthouse knew what was going on. Meanwhile, the person who made the threat was still at large. Nobody communicated to judiciary staff what was going on. The judges seemed perplexed as to what was going on. And people were coming and going from the building without really knowing what was happening. And so that, again, is an example of the lack of communication and a lack of seriousness that leaves our members to believe that we need another entity to manage the safety and security of not just our members in the courthouses, but the public that comes into the courthouses. We also have received complaints from members who serve as judicial assistants, primarily administrative staff that manage the WebEx for hearings and do really administrative tasks. We've gotten calls from judicial assistants who have been asked to secure courtrooms. Had no idea how to secure a courtroom. They don't know how they're supposed to protect the judge, but they've been told by the management to go do it. So this is a very serious situation that we're very grateful that this committee is willing to take a look at in a long-term way. And we hope that we can build upon some of the recommendations in the report of additional resources. But we also believe that the original position that was contemplated in the legislation that passed was for positions similar to state transport deputies, and we support that. And one of the reasons we do is because of what you heard Sheriff Anderson talk about a little bit here today, and was the testimony of the Sheriff's Association last year, that it'd be very difficult to fill these positions if they're contracted positions. And that really the resources of the state are needed in order to attract those folks who wish to make this a career. An example of the retirement that the sheriff raised, a very important issue. State transport deputies are in Group C. They already have the retirement age and benefits that the sheriffs seek. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have a very successful model. And we also understand that the Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs needs additional resources. We support those resources. We think they need to have what it is necessary in order to make sure that our members have the highest level of security they can have, and that our members have confidence that they are safe when they go to work in a courthouse, that they are safe when they attend a hearing at the courthouse, and more importantly, that that Vermonters who they serve in those courthouses are also safe. So generally, we found working with the judiciary on this report very positive. We found it to be a very positive process, but our conclusion is different, I think, in this one aspect. We believe the Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs should expand the state transport program in order to provide resources. Thank you very much.
Questions for Mr. Howard? So oh, go ahead, Representative.
I don't see the testimony here on our webpage. Is it available?
My testimony, I could provide it to you. I'm just doing some notes, but I can be happy to
That would be helpful.
provide it to you. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And committee, if we can just hang on for just a few minutes, I wanted to give Annie from the Department of State's Attorneys, the sheriffs, an opportunity to give us their thoughts on the recommendations, and then I'm sure we can have folks back as we consider the proposal.
Good morning, committee. Thanks for inviting me in. And thank you for letting me testify remotely. I had foot surgery, so I'm still hobbling around. The position of the Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs is that we fully support the judiciary's recommendation for how this security would be laid out. So similar to our 14 elected sheriffs, we also support the judiciary in this report. So that's the short version of this. I do want to mention 2 or 3 other quick points. The Department of State's Attorneys does not want to take on additional transport or security deputies. We do not have the capacity. I think you know, as a government operations committee, that our central office is very thinly staffed. And we, regardless of, taking this on, I also agree with Judge Zone and the folks at the judiciary who have talked about the separation of powers issues from the judiciary to the executive branch and then to our folks. I think that does become a problem. I trust the judiciary and Judge Zone and Terry and Corsones and Rob Schell to be able to manage this. So we fully support them. I would also want to just make one correction, which is in the situation where our Chittenden State's Attorney staff was escorted out of the building, that situation was fully involved the Vermont Department of Buildings and General Services Safety and Security staff. So if there was a breakdown in communication, it was not because there were no state employees involved in this discussion. In fact, they were involved from the get-go with as soon as that situation became known. So, just to summarize, we fully support the recommendation that has come to you from the Vermont judiciary. And just as a side note, we very much look forward to coming to your committee to talk about our budget. And as you're taking up the criminal justice system staffing. Thank you.
Thanks. I know we're running a little over time, but I wanted to quickly just ask Annie about, it seems like we were thinking when we passed S-17 Act 30 that the statewide transportation deputies might be a model. I'm hearing pretty clearly from you that the stakeholders kind of moved beyond that model. And I think the report, delves into the details, but I just wanted to confirm that the position from DSAS is that, we should go with this report, which has a variety of different recommendations as opposed to
Yes,
Go ahead.
yes, Mr. Chair, exactly. And it was described by Terry Crossons that the stakeholders were very much involved, and that's absolutely true. The sheriffs and our department were met, the judiciary met with us on a number of occasions. They shared all their information. We had meetings directly with Greg Mosley, who went over numbers. I feel like it was very, very, very thoroughly vetted, and so I have full confidence in what the judiciary has put forward to your committee.
Great. Well, I'm sure we'll be seeing many of you back on this issue and others as we pick up some other public safety work as well. We'll break for today. Committee, we have a really stacked 1 to 3. So please be in your seats at 1 o'clock. So I'll let everybody go to lunch now.